Alright, I'm back with another Destiny 2 video, and I kind of thought that today's TWA wouldn't be the most substantive for a full kind of read-through, and turns out I was right. We are sort of in the middle of this season now, and there's not a ton going on week to week, but we are still not far enough in where they are going to be previewing next season stuff yet either. They hinted that they were going to do a grand Iron Banner reveal at some point here, but that's, I don't know, that might not be here for another month or something. They did mention something I wrote an article about today, and I kind of wanted to get into a larger conversation about this because this has turned out to be really divisive. I know everything's divisive in Destiny because it's Destiny, but this is about Grandmaster Nightfall difficulty. Those launched this week, and players were surprised to figure out that there's a new modifier that was introduced this season that they specifically said would not be in Grandmasters, that is in Grandmasters. That is Acute Burn, which is whatever elemental type they're talking about per strike. It's 25% more damage by players, but players also receive 50% more damage from that elemental type. We've had this kind of in operation for a while now on some of the higher level strikes, but in GMs with the power disparity and how hard GMs are already, it's kind of a new level, and this has split the player base between whether this is something to keep GMs challenging and fresh, or whether it is something that is difficulty in a bad way and not fun and too hard, and we'll get into that. But this, I will read the TWAB section about this that they talk about a little bit. Grandmaster Nightfalls have also returned, bringing our more challenging strike content back into the fold. We've got a slight clarification on some patch notes from launch dealing with acute burns. In Destiny 2 update 4001, it was incorrectly noted that these burns would not be present in Grandmaster difficulty. Acute burns are intentional and replace the unique strike modifiers, smaller burns plus extra knockback or splash damage. The new seasonal modifiers, invisible enemies, etc. are not included in Grandmasters. We've updated our patch notes page to reflect. With that said, we highly recommend using some elemental damage resist mods on your chest pieces as you build craft for the difficulty. So this was something that Bungie kind of always wanted to plan for Grandmasters. I am leaning toward the side of not loving this as a difficulty modifier. The reason being is I agree with the assessment that this feels a lot like Glass used to, where that was the mod that they had for a very long time, where players would suffer increased damage, but they'd have like crazy recovery. And that was even before kind of the era of GMs, but it was such like an annoying modifier that everyone just didn't want to bother with it at all. And it kind of also reminds me a little bit of the old Blackout, where any melee hit would just insta-kill you, which is possible with GMs with the right burns on now. And I think there was a reason they got rid of these, and it wasn't because like it was too challenging. It was that it was too challenging in like an annoying way where it just does not feel good to be killed in some of these ways. We've talked about previously about how they're going to nerf Scorn crossbows because they're just one-shotting people at a wide range of difficulties, not just GMs. But amping up the burns like this, 50% increased elemental damage from these enemies. Also, it usually corresponds with whatever the boss is for a GM strike. So the big one everyone's complaining about right now is the light. What's it called? The Lightbringer? Sorry, I have not slept much. You know what I'm talking about? Alakul, the light guy with the axe, whatever. That one is supposed to be kind of the hard gatekeep for a lot of people's GMs guilding this time because of how kind of crazy the burns amp things up there. And you can just kind of be instant team wiped like in that boss phase. Here's kind of what I'm seeing is I am seeing a good amount of like really, really pro GM people say that this is not that big of a deal, and they just are kind of sailing through these GMs without any wipes as is, because you can do them all back to back to back now. I know a lot of people are just kind of going in and rolling through them and didn't have to change their tactics around too much. But I have also seen kind of a subset of people where if you might have been on the fence about doing GMs before, or you weren't like as crazily devoted to them as some people, This may be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, where you're like, I'm just not even going to bother with this anymore, with 50% increased damage on these bosses and like half a third of the damage throughout the entire strike. And it does kind of feel like glass and things of that nature all over again. GMs have always been a little bit in a weird spot because they're so punishing with survivability. I would say that I haven't really loved kind of the mechanics behind a lot of the GMs because it really, really negates. But Bungie has never really figured out a way to do kind of close range combat that is still difficult. It's like you have to be mid to long range for the vast majority of these and play so cautiously. And like now with Void, we're like spamming overshields and like spamming all these different things to kind of negate just the sheer amounts of insane incoming damage, whether that's snipers or grenades and tracking arc things and whatever. Like it's a little much, and I was hoping for kind of more flexibility, not less, by making survivability worse in these. Like I agree that GMs should be challenging, but like this kind of circles back to the whole like what is challenging really in Destiny debate these days. And for once, this doesn't have to do with champions. This is just sort of like, how do you want the game to feel? Like, do you want like, if you glance at an ogre for half a second, does it really feel better now that you die after a quarter of a second now? You know what I mean? Like, it's things of that nature. And I think there was a reason that everyone just hated glass or like the old blackout or things like that, is because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of counterplay. And the counterplay is just being way more cautious. And I do not think being way more cautious is a very fun way to play Destiny. Like, I think you can get like a really solid team together and like execute like a really cool, strategy and GM sometimes. It's just, I feel like it is such a small niche where I don't know why they're bothering to like keep making GMs more and more out of reach for more players. I don't even think the GM rewards aren't even that good anymore. Like Ascendant Shards drop somewhat routinely. Those have been pretty devalued now at this point because you can now change armor affinity on a whim, so you really do not need all that many sets of masterworked armor, which is all they are used for. And then we have, adept weapons and things like that, but out of all the Nightfall weapons, there are maybe like 2 or 3 that are live at any given time that are actively meta in some activity or another. Like right now, like Palindrome obviously is still pretty strong, but like the adept version is a tiny, bump over the base version, and it's like, is it worth, farming your god roll adepts, pally? Like, it just, I don't know if they need to like gatekeep these rewards as hard as they have been doing, and then kind of doing something intentional to beef up the challenge even further. Well, I think that Destiny does need challenging content for a certain crowd. Like, I feel like Destiny already has a good amount of like self-imposed like you can solo Grandmasters, you can solo dungeons and 2-man raid segments and 3-man raid like there are things, if you are that like desperate to be in search of a challenge, I feel like there are things you can do for yourself in order to get that done. And I when I was reading this article, I was reminded of a quote that Steven Totillo got, I think it was at GDC, where they were talking about how when they first built Grandmasters, they thought only 100 people would beat them in week 1, and then like 40,000 people beat them. And the moral of the story was like, always make your stuff too hard before you make it easier, because people are better than you think and will be more creative than you think and think of better strategies. I just like, Grandmasters have been here for so long now, it just seems very odd to me to kind of just keep cranking up the difficulty in a way that really goes after survivability in particular. Especially like, it's not just that, like they also just nerfed Protective Light, that got a huge nerf as of this season, where it went down to 20%, I think, from 50%. And like, yes, there are other things in there now, like Renewal Grasp and things for defense and Void Overshields. And I think you can make the argument that Void 3.0 has made us really, really strong to the point where maybe that offsets at least some of the increase in difficulty here. We have separate conversations about power creep and how Void 3.0 just seems miles better than like anything else in the game now, to the point where it does sort of trivialize a lot of normal Destiny content. So maybe GMs are like the thing that actually kind of puts Void 3.0 to the test. But the reactions I'm seeing are pretty mixed. I don't think this is like the end of the world because GMs aren't like the most popular thing to begin with, and the people that really love GMs, I don't think this is going to stop them from playing. And then the people that were like so-so on GMs might go them into, or like herd them into not doing it anymore just because it's this bad now with the burns and stuff. But I don't think it's like something that's going to be a big enough deal to make or break the entire mode. And if you turn off that completely and you don't replace the old things like the minor burns and the splash damage and whatever, that kind of stuff, like then GMs probably are too easy. So I think they did need to find some sort of middle ground solution here. And like maybe this isn't it. Like maybe they drop it down to 25% and 25 instead of 25 and 50. I don't know, something like that. But I don't really love the direction this is moving in. I think we made a lot of really positive strides in game difficulty and how that feels with the introduction of the legendary campaign, and kind of how contest mode feels for raids. And GMs in the past even have been an interesting kind of display of difficulty, but I don't think the answer is like allow people to get one shot more often. I don't think that is the way forward in terms of how difficulty should feel. I like feeling like when I die, I want to know it was absolutely my fault and it wasn't like, I stepped out somewhere I shouldn't have for like 0.01 seconds or something. Like you could say every death in GM is your fault to some extent, but with these kind of mechanics, with these kind of burns, it's a little hard for me to say it's the same type of challenge that we've seen both in this game and in some of the better challenging modes, and then other games that do difficulty in different ways. So this will be here till at least the end of the season. I think people would probably have to make a really big fuss in order for it to be changed, and that may not happen. Again, if it doesn't get changed, I don't think it's the end of the world, but I also can be like, yeah, I don't know if this is the play really. So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm sure it'll be divisive there too. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.